What's up, everybody? I am Benny Hurwitz. Thanks for joining us today, taking time out of your day to tune in to another session of Portland Cocktail Week distance learning, sponsored by Campari Academy and Campari America. So these are sessions or seminars by great hosts, industry leaders from around the country. And today we're here with Mate Hartai. But before we get into your official introduction, of course, I got to do my little wild turkey plug. So, often we talk about the history of wild turkey. It's been around since the 1940s, making bourbon. But today I'm going to talk about some rye. So, Wild Turkey started bottling rye back in the 1950s. Now, at the time, the company was still based in New York. That's Austin Nichols that owned Wild Turkey. And their bourbon came from our distillery that's still there today in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. But when we started bottling rye about 10 years after bourbon, we sourced our rye from Maryland and Pennsylvania, which I think is a fun little fact. A lot of times Jimmy Russell, our master distiller, would tell a story. If you drank rye in the 40s or 50s, it came from Maryland and Pennsylvania. If you drank bourbon, it came from Kentucky. And, still most all the bourbon in the world is made in Kentucky, but now most all the rye is, the American rye is made there as well. So nowadays we make all our own rye. We have since the 70s at the distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky, the same place we make our bourbon. And over the years, we've seen the line evolve quite a bit. Originally, it was just 101 rye to pair with our 101 bourbon. And then it evolved into some other proofs. And later on, we come out with Russell's Reserve and a couple ryes under that line. And today, I just wanted to highlight the newest product that we have in our rye category, and that's Rare Breed Rye. I think this is a great addition to the lineup that I've been just personally so excited about and waiting for. It just came out about a month ago. And it's our same rye mash bill, that Kentucky style rye, just over 51% corn or 51% rye with a good amount of corn in it, as well as malted barley. So it is barrel proof. That's what makes Rare Breed a little different than other Wild Turkey products. Rare Breed bourbon is barrel proof, and now so is the rye. So 112.2 proof, a combination of 4, 6, and 8-year-old rye barrels to make this product. Again, something that's super cool and just came out. So I definitely encourage folks to look out for that. Now, with that said, I want to officially introduce Mate Hartai. He's a jack of all trades based in Houston, Texas, and he's worked in pretty much all the facets of our beverage industry. I mean, from bartender to director of operations and brand ambassador, he's done it all. So having worked a shift with Mate down in Houston one time, I can definitely tell you he's highly regarded by his peers. Everybody loves this guy. But Mate, please tell us a little more about yourself, what you've been up to, and then, of course, your class, Systems of Pressure.
Awesome. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to skip the introductions of myself, just because not very good at talking about myself. More of a topical person. But I think let's just go ahead and launch into it, if you don't mind. And obviously, you can always hit up my Instagram if you want to contact me at any time. And if you want to just get a hold of me for whatever chit chat, I could put all the intros in there. That would be it right there. Awesome. Yeah, let's get rolling. Systems of Pressure. Let's do this. All right. So if you've ever taken a course from me, I really do minimal slides. This time I tried to add as much into the slides. So that's not just me talking, but normally I have minimal slides because I really don't like reading to you what you're reading. It's mildly, condescending. But what we're going to cover today is system design, constraints, gas types, components, and all wrapped up into a mock consultation. At the very end, we're going to be focusing on cocktails, not beer. Beer is very specific. Again, we're going to talk about this again later, but you can go hit up the draft quality manual, and that link will be up later, not right now, so you're not typing, but Google that at any time. Almost everything I'm talking about is in there. It's just beer focused. So let's roll. So in your system design, at the end of the day, you just sit down and you try to figure out what your goals are, what your budget is, which will then kind of set the stage for your upkeep, your scope, and everything else. Your goals at this point, let's just pretend we're only working from a cocktail source, is you're running a bar that wants to do cocktails on draft. Chances are you have some sort of cooling utensil already on deck. And what we're going to talk really a bit about is constraints. Whenever you're designing a system, your biggest constraints are your existing systems. Do you have a low boy? Do you have a walk-in cooler? What do you have? Those basic systems will kind of streamline the entire process behind them. So let's hit that next slide. Okay, so let's just say that we're working with a normal bar. You either have a 3-door low boy or maybe a 2-door, reach-in cooler or a walk-in cooler. So the next big constraint is the gas. So we're going to go through the entire gas system from here on out. And we're going to focus on this draft system by what component it works off of. So first off is gas, the gas itself. So either you're going to be working with CO2 or nitrogen or a blend of the two. So CO2 dissolves over time, and there's a lot of equations that cover this. Obviously, the lower temperature you're at and the lower floating little bits you have, just simplifying things in your solution, the better CO2 will dissolve into it. It's an equation of time. That's a train, by the way, but hey, hi train. Bye train. So it's it's gonna be one more. No? Okay. It's teasing me. Okay, so it's an equation of pressure and time and temperature. So the lower the pressure, or the lower the time, the higher the pressure, the longer the time and the lower the temperature, the more CO2 you get into it. Now, what you have on screen is it's a very complicated machine that you can hook up to your keg. It will tell you the volumes of CO2. That's about a $2,000 little doodad right there. You really don't need it for what we're doing. But if you're a brewer and you're trying to gauge how much CO2 is in it, it is discussed in volumes of CO2. Nucleation sites and temperature allow that CO2 to escape. So headspace in a keg, dirt on the side of a glass, citrus and other floaty bits in whatever way in your cocktail all allow that CO2 little doors to escape solution, which is what we call a nucleation site. Poorly washed glass, when you put it down, if there's bubbles stuck to the outside, those are nucleation sites. Your next gas up, so CO2 is great because it does dissolve. It gives you carbonation. Nitrogen, all pressure, no freaky. So basically in order to dissolve nitrogen into solution, it takes so much pressure and so much time. That's not going to realistically happen in the service of an entire keg beverage. So basically, you're pushing a cocktail, whether it's still or sparkling, you could do it through nitrogen. Doing a sparkling cocktail over CO2 is ideal because it will keep your keg slowly dissolving CO2 into it and allow it to build pressure over time. At the end of the day, it's constraints, but either one of these you can buy directly from a gas source. Chances are your venue already has a gas source. And sometimes if you have an already existing draft system, they will have what's called a generator, a nitrogen generator, which pulls nitrogen out of the air. And you will have a bulk CO2 tank. So let's hop to the next slide. At the very right side, the big and bossy, those are bulk CO2 tanks. So we're all on the CO2 side. Nitrogen is very easy to work with. CO2 is a little bit harder. But all of these things will come in these forms. So on the very far side, the big and bossy for CO2 is a bulk CO2 tank. That comes with a subscription. They refuel you whenever you order it. There's a gauge on top of it that will tell you when you're out. Thing you're going to run into most is the Titan Classy, the tanks. Those come in different sizes, but for the most part, they just drop off new ones. It's really easy to tell. There's no built-in pressure gauge, so that's going to be running off your primary regulator, which we'll talk about later. And then my favorite, the little toot guys, that's also CO2. You can get nitrogen in those as well. That's for smaller applications or mobile uses. You don't really need that. But these are kind of your introduction. You will be using one of these in your system. So next up, regulators. So much of the terminology we're using is necessary terminology. The draft text and installation text we'll use to talk to you, or we'll use to talk you through a problem. So if you don't know these terms, you're not going to know how to access them. My favorite term is the word tap. Let's tap a keg. I'll grab the taps, put the taps on the wall. There's no such thing as a tap. Literally, it is a functionless word. It's kind of like saying the word hops. Doesn't really give you any information. It's in there, you know it's a part of it, but it's not really a part of it. So we're going to go through these terms. They're important so that you can interface with the technicians. Go ahead, hop back. There we go. So,
Oh, looks like he froze there for a second, Mate. Give him a second to come back in. I think he's getting ready to go through all these little pieces and different connections. The internet, guys, does it to us all right when we need it the most. I think this is one of the most exciting topics that I never get sick of. So hopefully we get him back here in a second. Remember, if you guys have any questions, just hit them in the comments on Facebook. We can address them at the end. Come on, Mate, you can do it. All right. Means he's probably be back in just a second, y'all. Thanks for bearing with us. I wish I had a little more knowledge on this topic myself. All right. Sounds like he's coming back right now. One moment, y'all. Just hang in there. Kind of feel like I'm on the news right now. This just in. Mate will be joining us in just a moment. Also like his descriptions, all the doodly bits. All right, should be just another minute. He just texted us saying he's rejoining. I think he's actually at work, so, you know, the internet. I mean, you guys probably don't want to hear me talk about wild turkey for a whole hour, but I could. Here we go.
My bad. We're actually inside of an operating restaurant. If you could pop back to the regulators for me, Leo. Okay, so
All
you
right.
have a primary, which would be on your very left side. You have CO2 and gas primary regulators. They're going to have they have the little red and green arrows on them. Those are going to show you your tank health. And then they have a pressure valve. So primary regulator regulates the pressure coming out of your tank going into your system. That is the ultimate you're going to be able to get in your system. Obviously, the other gauge tells you how full your tank is. The second little row of 4 over there, those are secondary regulators. That's telling you how much pressure is coming downwards out of the system. You can shut those off. There's usually some safety valves as well, but the gauge will tell you exactly how much pressure is going down into the lines. The little splitter up top has no pressure regulation, but you use that to split gas lines when you don't need different kegs running at different pressures. Awesome. So sorry about the technical interjection in there. So let's hit that next slide. So your next one is your gas tubing. Personally, I prefer vinyl because it's clear, it's vinyl braided, it's extra hard to cut through, or you could use any other type. Now, the internal diameter is super important. Your gas is going to run at 5/16. Your outer diameter is up to you, either 9/16 or 7/16. If you want it to be more pliable, it's going to move around a lot. 7/16 is great. 9/16 is the thicker one. It's going to give you a little bit more life and strength, but it's up to you. Inner diameter is a super important one you need to remember. So next slide. So couplers, this is a coupler. It is not a tap. It is not anything else you want to call it. So on the very left, you see Sankey. Sankey is basically the kind of monopolized system that the beer industry runs through. So there's many different Sankey couplers. D is the type you'll use in America. There's probably 5 or 6 different types, depending on where in the world you're getting it from. We're not actually using that stuff. They're super expensive. They're annoying. They're not that hard to take apart. There's a lot of moving parts. A lot of moving parts equals a lot of broken stuff. So on the other side of your screen, you're going to see the couplers that we use. So generally associate the color to what's going through it. Lighter colored ones are going to move gas, which has no color, and the darker ones are going to move liquid. Personally, I like the ones on the bottom that have a barb on them because you can just immediately attach your line, put a hose clamp on it, you're good to go. The other ones kind of try to tell you that it's easier to remove and put back on, but the thing is, if you're moving a gas line or a liquid line, you're going to have to cut it anyways because you're probably replacing it. You get the metal ones, they're great, but they're really not necessary, and they're probably 4 times the price of the plastic ones. Again, the plastic ones are like $6 a pop. Get 5 extra. It will go a long way. Next. Awesome. So now you have your keg. Now we're switching over to the liquid side. On the left, you see a Sankey keg. It's got a lot of labels and things. You can find all of this in the Draft Tech Quality Manual. Again, it's a self-contained system. It takes liquid from the top and it pushes gas into the bottom to push it down up into that what we call a down tube or a valve. So the way a Cornelius keg, which is what we call a Corny keg, uses, just in this cutaway, you can see that there's a tube going down. That is the out tube. Then there's also an in tube, which normally in a regular coupler would be integrated, but for us it's separate, right? So there's two couplers working. You can open your keg and look inside. You will have one tube going down. That is always the liquid tube. Rarely there will be 2 tubes, and then you need to make a decision. The beauty of it is that the couplers only fit their own size. So if you're having to force it, you're on the wrong side. That down tube will suck up bits of citrus and all kinds of crazy things. So you want to make sure everything going into that keg is nicely filtered. You see the top here, and then you see the little cap. That cap has a O-ring on it. Thing needs to get cleaned, and you will lose it if you allow them to live in separate places. So those are things to keep track of, but it's, again, very simple. A Sankey keg runs between $300 to $500. Our keg runs between $100 to $300. You can pop on homebrewing sites. Kegs are very easy to reuse, very easy to replace components on. Right now, you can pick them up for $50 to $75, and they come in all different sizes. Yay. Next slide. So the next bit is, I hope you enjoy all of my slide language here. I'm trying to debunk all of the seriousness that comes along with this. You're not working on a car. All of these pieces are super robust. They're built to take a lot of damage. They could be taken apart, put together much easier than a toaster. And it really just depends on you having the confidence to do it. So a draft tower on your very right is going to have air, cooled air funneling up because it's part of the cooler. It's going to have a shank attached to it, which is in the middle. A nipple shank will go straight through. That's what you use for coolers when you have your draft system attached to the wall. And then a bent tube shank is what you're going to have in draft towers. Now, if that bent tube shank gets wiggled and moves to the side, it will pinch whatever line it's on, and it will cause all kinds of restrictions. That is pretty common. I see it all the time. That's one of those things where you just need to pop the top off that draft tower, look down, make sure everything's not been pulled off. As far as faucets go, again, you can take one of these apart with a Phillips head screwdriver, clean it, put it back together. You should be doing that every 2 weeks. The only specialized tool you need is a shank wrench. You can Google shank wrench. It just has 2 little prongs on it, kind of looks like you doing this, and you go opposite that you normally would in a regular screwdriving motion. That's basically it. So your faucet, what you have in the middle there is a flow control valve. Flow control faucets are excellent when you have a pressurized thing and you're adding extra gas to it. They're excellent for cocktails that aren't even carbonated because you can restrict the flow at the faucet. So if you have too much cocktail coming out at a crazy speed, because you're also trying to keep up the carbonation, it allows you to kind of control at the point of dispense what you actually have coming out. So if you're doing cocktails, I highly recommend that. A lot of times you're stuck with Old Faithful. Those are in no way bad. They just need cleaning every couple of weeks. And that's it. It's such a robust system. Every little piece that's in here can be bought at any homebrew store, by the way. They are not the cheapest. I recommend going online and doing searches there. But yeah, let's move along. We're getting through all the doodly bits. So next, you're going to find this in what's called a long draw system, which we'll talk about in just a second. Fobs, which if you'd maximize that for us. Thank you. So fobs are foam on beer detectors. So what they do is whenever your keg is out of liquid, that little containment area will sense it. A floater will drop and it will cut off flow to the keg. So it won't blow. It'll just slowly come to a trickle and stop. They're using draft beer systems. I don't recommend them in cocktails. It's just another piece that can break in the system. A power pack, which is what's right next to it, via Micromatic is basically a glycol-assisted chiller. So all it does is it chills glycol and it recirculates it through a trunk tube line. That's when your dispense point is far away from your cooling point. Hopefully that's not you, because those are about $8,000 and you need a tech to work on them if anything happens. Though 90% of the time, it's just out of glycol. Glycol is a food safe refrigerant that does not in any way come in contact with your draft system. Moving on. Awesome. So your two kinds of draft systems, which you talked about, got the shorty and the long boys. So the long boys, you see that trunk line. The trunk line enters the cooler, joins the draft lines, and will go into this black line. Okay, that line is called the trunk line, and you'll see two colored tubes in it, usually a red and a blue. That's the coming and going line for the glycol. They are touching every other line in it, and the whole point is to keep it below 38 degrees the entire way. And that's the system for beer, which works very well for us, even though we don't necessarily need it to be that cold for the most part. Again, the coldness in this case is there because if it heats up, the CO2 will come out of solution, and then at the end of the line, all you get is foam. That is really bad in beer. It's not something that plagues us in cocktail world very much. The shorty is what you're going to find in most bars, most systems. You have a tower that's attached to a drip tray. That tower is cooled by the air in that cooler. Usually you have a tank, and that's about it. Inside, you're going to find some splitters for the gas lines, probably the lowest amount of regulators that you can. There's going to be secondary regulators in it, and usually your primary regulator is attached to your gas source. And that's basically it. Let's move ahead. Now you have your mobile system. So this is you working some party offsite. You're going to need your gas tank. You're going to need a primary regulator. That primary regulator is going to function as your primary and your secondary in this case. You don't need all the extra stuff. You're really going to push everything at the same speed, ideally. It's best to keep your stuff cold. There's two ways to do it. You can trash can it and ice it, which is wonderful, or you can use a jockey box. Jockey boxes either have coils, which are very finicky, break all the time, or plates, which get you a little bit less contact time and a little bit less chill time, but they are extremely robust. If you have a choice, go with plates. But this is, again, mostly geared towards beer. Generally, you could just put this, if you're working a cocktail, especially one that's lowly carbonated or not carbonated, you can hook it up to a CO2 system and run it for an entire 4-hour event and not have any issues, just be changing your keg left and right. And any chilling you can do with ice in a glass or chilling of the liquid before it hits the tank. It can get very, very simple. And I could show you that in the exact next slide, which would be the nerd edition. Welcome me. So that's me from 2000, I think 6 or 2009, whatever. That's from Bar Fight, right when the 86 Co and Del McGay took it over. I was told that I can't put a backpack on my back. I can't put a keg on my back and serve 2,000 people walking around an event. So naturally, I made a keg backpack and I served 2,000 people walking around an event. That's a PVC frame put together from end pieces and normal stuff you could buy in any homebrew store or home improvement store. And that's a small 3.5 liter, 3.5 gallon keg that I put on my back. The pressure system is, you can see it in the next picture. It actually attaches to these little straps. Sorry. It attaches to these nice little straps with zip ties. And what's at the end of it is at the very corner of the slide. It's a hand-operated, cartridge-based CO2 addition system. The entire thing ran like a boss. I've run carbonated cocktails. In the second picture you see, I'm actually running rosé for a staff appreciation party. They're very good, very easy. I never had any temperature issues. It's quite wonderful, and it's a fun little party gag. But it demonstrates how easy and bare bones you can have a cocktail dispense system. It's that easy. You need liquid, you need gas, and you need all the lines to get it from one thing to the other. Next slide.
Awesome.
So we're ripping through this, I know. So
yeah.
So next up, let's do a mock consultation. Don't even worry about reading what I wrote up here. It's mostly a joke. But the idea is to understand that this is you and a client walking through. It's not about you implementing what you want. It's about them getting the result that you want, that they want. So it's about being the medium and navigating that planning stage in the middle. Get exactly what they want for as little as they have to put into it. So that's kind of what I've been doing for a long time. And we'll walk through a mock consultation for you right now. So let's hit that next slide. This is an installation plan. So don't start reading it yet. I know there's a bunch of little things in there. So basically I would ask you, go ahead and make me big. There we go, perfect. So I would ask you, hey, how many drafts do you want? How many of those do you want carbonated? How many of those do you want still? And do you want any extra features into this? Do you want to be able to pressure infused with nitrogen? Do you want to carbonate cocktails on the system? We could build all of those in. So this specific system is a draft installation plan that I drew up for a system I was rewiring in a bar in Houston. And you can make the plan big now. So in this, you can see blue lines for liquid, black lines for gas. The little number 2s are secondary regulators. They lead out to the gas sources. So in this case, we have 3 carbonated cocktails, 2 nitrogenated cocktails. You have your CO2 coming in. I'm actually using old regulators that they had left over. And that's why it has a little X, because it was meant to be in line. So I knew I had to put a cap into that line. Now regulators only regulate the pressure coming out, not the pressure going between each other. So what I did is I asked them, do you guys want to carbonate things on this draft system since you have extra regulators? The answer was yes. So the first thing you see on the coming in from the CO2 line is a secondary regulator with a dead line. That's a carbonation line. It doesn't need a liquid line. Literally, what we do with that is you can hook up a keg. Ideally, I would have them buy a carbonation stone, which again, you can Google what that is. It's just a tube that goes into a small perforated metal or aluminum or rock. And what that does is expands the CO2 and the surface area of the CO2 into tiny little bubbles that allows it to carbonate much faster and at much lower temperatures. It just speeds up the carbonation process. When you're carbonating, you should be around 40 PSI. If you're pushing nitrogen into a cocktail, you're looking at a little bit higher. Always check your keg rating. It's going to be printed on the keg. Do not exceed that ever. You could have all kinds of bad things happen. But as long as you're within its rated limit, it can usually do 1.5 its rated limit. Do not test that. But in a carbonated setting like this, in a day, you will have a carbonated cocktail. You really need to get the point across that using live citrus in a cocktail, it will be dead in 5 days. You know, if you have regular citrus, it will die in 3. Like with the extra sugar, the alcohol, and the dilution, it has a couple of extra days of life, but it will not live forever. So encourage the use of mimics. Feel free to pop onto the White Lion articles. There's tons of other people that have fancy names for basically citrus-soluble citric acid mimics of different solutions. Use those. Use those for cocktails. They'll live forever, basically. And you want as little floaty bits in your cocktail as much as possible to increase its carbonation intake. So if you maximize that for me one more time. If you look at this installation plan, everything that's in it is in the bits documentation. So every little red line is a hose connector. That's a hose clamp. In the secondary regulator coming from the CO2, you see a splitter. That means that I don't need to regulate the pressure for those. Those are going to be running at probably 12 to 15 pounds. You know, anything more than that, you're probably just creating a fire hydrant at your faucet. It's not necessary. And your nitrogen line is going to run about the same, maybe even a little bit less. And there's a splitter there as well, because we don't need the gas running individually. If you have one thing on that's a beer that needs to run at a higher pressure than your low pressured cocktails, I would do a second line for that. But this, you can see that the couplers are either white for gas or black for liquid. So we have an easy shopping list already ready to go from this. Everything for this consultation is on the right. It's minimal tools. I usually put the entire system together. And then before I start attaching things in the nice, neat little setups inside the cooler with little attachment bolts, I make sure the entire system works. So as I add components onto a pressurized system, I have it pressurized, and then I have a giant bucket of water. Then I take that pressurized thing and I dunk it in the water. If there's any air bubbles coming out, then you have a leak. Something's wrong. Either the component's leaky or your connection's bad. You just need to redo one of those two things. If all the connections are good, then you're probably using an old component. Get a new one. It's worth the investment. Secondarily, if you're ripping through a system and you know that there's a leak somewhere, your best friend is a spray bottle with soap and water. You trace the entire thing, especially the gas lines, and while it's pressurized, you soak the thing in with just the wide spray bottle angle, and you will see nice soapy little bubbles anywhere you have a leak. If you have a leak and you have a large tank system, it'll take a long time for you to find out. But if you have the small tanks, you'll be out of gas in a day or two. So a systematic look and run through of this every month to make sure you don't have leaks with just a spray bottle is going to get you exactly where you need to go. As far as cleaning, the two rules that we take over from brewing is 2 weeks and 1 month. What they do is in 2 weeks, they check a system and they will do an acid cleaning that will get rid of living contaminants. And then every month, what they do is they run the system with caustic or a base, and that will get rid of all of the basically minerals and things that deposit in your lines. In this, you're looking at 25 to 30 feet of gas line and maybe 20 feet of liquid line. That is probably one of your cheapest ingredients in this entire kit. So, and you're looking at less than $300 for all of this without the kegs. So this is a really cheap system. It's an extremely good way to get especially prepared bottled cocktails together to where you can do the bottled cocktails and you can serve on your patios, whatever you're doing. It's drafting cocktails and being able to put those recipes in place to where they live for more than 5 days is an essential way to pull out extra revenue and add revenue streams to your system. As far as cleaning goes, take all your faucets off, and I have these resources myself where I teach, but you can literally find videos on YouTube. You don't even have to go through me, how to clean a faucet. I have little placemats that I can put out that I printed all of the different components in real size so you can put them in place and to see if you're missing anything. And it's very much putting together a very simple puzzle. So it's really not hard. It's a YouTube search at best for the component. You need to know the component name ideally, and then you take it apart. Faucets in these systems are not worth any kind of cleaning or doing. It's either clean and you can clean it with hot water. I recommend a cocktail system be just run through with hot water every 2 weeks, maybe soapy water. I don't really think soapy water is necessary most of the time because you're just going to get soap into your system, which is a little weird, but honestly, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, you just load up one of your kegs with hot water or some kind of cleaning solution. You run it. Ideally, what you want to do is add some dye to that cleaning solution, especially if you have soap to it, red, blue, whatever you like. And then when you run it with hot water again to flush the system, you will know you're good when you're running clean. There's none of that colors in there. So that's kind of a nice little trick. Most caustic solutions and acidic solutions that you buy in packets will already have a color to them. I've many times seen a draft system where a draft tech comes through, cleans it with caustic, and then leaves caustic in the line. You serve any of that in a beer glass to a person and they drink it, they basically erode from the inside. It's really not pretty. It's the one part of a draft system where you really have to be very careful, but it's also extremely avoidable. So you want to keep your lines nice and clean. Everything's see-through, including your gas lines, like your vinyl braided ones, braided for everyone's pleasure. So all of those things are ready to go. If you see a stain in there, it's literally a clip, a hose clamp. Do not get crimped hose clamps. Go to Home Depot and buy the hose clamps that you need. So again, to reiterate, your gas lines are going to be 5/16 inner diameter ID. Outside is up to you. Your liquid lines are going to be 3/16 inner diameter. 7/16 on the outer diameter if you want nice flexibility. If you just want them to be rigid and stand up, the keg sitting on them and all kinds of dumb stuff, then get the 9/16 on the outer diameter. But the inner diameter is your attachment point. On your tools, you'll also see a power drill. I don't like to take my time with hose clamps. They literally are just a clamp with a small little screw on it, and it's much easier with a power drill, but you can do it with a regular drill. Shears are an excellent way, like gardening shears, and are an excellent way to just cut nice, cleanly through anything. I always have a hot water kettle whenever I'm attaching liquid lines and gas lines onto either a splitter or a faucet, anything, because it gets it basically softens up the vinyl. You push it on with the clamp already on there. It form fits to the thing. It's usually a little bit smaller than what you're pushing it onto in the first place, so it just makes everything easier. And there you go. You tighten your connections. You go through with your spray bottle, or you dunk each component to make sure your pressure's safe, and you're ready to go. Other than that, that's basically it. These systems are really not that hard. You go through the draft tech, the draft quality manual if you want to really get into There's literally math for when you were designing a draft system for beer that takes apart all of these things and shows you the equations of how much restriction and how much basically turbulence each foot of line will put into a beer. And you have to put that into an equation of resistance of how much CO2 pressure you put on it. So you can get really technical, but it's completely unnecessary for drafts because you're not serving something as volatile as beer. Beer is extremely volatile. So we're downgrading the system and making it simpler, which is why I didn't add any of that math, because you don't really have to do it. You can make this as complicated as you want. The downside of having a long draw system is that trunk is extremely expensive. They're like $4,000 or $5,000. And the thing is, when you run really volatile components like ginger, turmeric, or all these spices through, it will stay in the line. The jumper line will cost you a whopping 45 cents to replace, and that trunk line will cost you $45,000 or $450, $4,500. So make those,
Yeah.
make those. Whenever the way we did in the beer world is if you put on a lambic sour onto a line, that line on a long draw system is now a lambic sour line. That's it. It's going to get into the system, especially funky, weird yeasts and things, especially ginger-based cocktails. It's not really going to cause any flavor problems for another ginger cocktail, but it will absolutely, you're dedicating that line. And it's as easy as replacing the line and running a little cleaner through it, and you'll be running a daiquiri through it in no time. So it's not really a problem. I believe I have one last slide. There we go. Okay, so the name of this class is Systems of Pressure. So we're going to go ahead and do a little sidebar, and if you'll bear with me, Benny, we'll get to questions and things later. I hope we're on the same bar. Okay, so systems of pressure, which this is a system of pressure, but we have many systems of pressure that we deal with. So I had a really good friend. I was watching just like this, an educational piece on barschool.pl from Ian Griffiths. And you can go on barschool.pl and find his talk. It's recorded live. Please watch it. It's excellent. Really talks about the future of hospitality and why we even got to this place in the first place. So one of the things he brings up, which has been for like a year and a half, 2 years for me, is just an under the collar conversation that I've just been holding on to and in small circles. And I think it's time for that not to be in small circles anymore. And it has a nice little, so you're going to take a little journey with me that might not be as draft focused as possible. It is still a system of pressure. So we are on brand. So the hot button here is Escoffier. If you are not familiar with Escoffier, he is the sauciest saucier ever to sauce a souffle, or also the inventor of the Brigade Kitchen. So the Brigade Kitchen is basically applying a military structure to a kitchen. It is excellent for creating results. So if you've ever seen a Michelin top 10, James Beard top 10, every top 10 all over the list of professional kitchens, you will see some form of the Brigade Kitchen function. So let's look at that just a little bit, because our industry also borrows from it hardcore. We definitely idolize and kind of purify the system. But really, we need to know exactly what we're working with. So the brigade system works off the military, right? So what's the military in any country? It's this thing that keeps you safe, right? That's what we're told. Okay, we both had a little light go on, me and you here. That's probably not really what's happening. It's actually out there to win wars. Now, we're not going to get into politics really for that, but it doesn't really keep you safe. But the way that they win is very specific, and we've learned this through history many times. It's not the amount of gadgets you have, not the amount of money you have. It's who is willing to do what the other person isn't. And whether it's Afghanistan or Vietnam or all these other conflicts, it gets proven over and over again. The people that have more invested in the fight, the ones that are willing to go deeper and harder and weaker, are the ones that almost always win. And how do we do this? So militaries from the Spartans to everything now have perfected this system that creates people that are willing to do that thing that is what's necessary sometimes. So how do they do that? So they take three things out of the equation. Okay, it's empathy and compassion for other people. It's freedom of thought, and it's individuality, which all of us in civilian life consider cornerstones of humanity, right? So they basically strip you of your humanity and they make you a very efficient cog in a machine where you could be sacrificed, but you don't really know. And it wins wars. Now you take that system, you apply it to a civilian population where that war is being fought, and you end up with starvation, rape, torture, firebombing entire cities in Japan. Really bummer shit, right? It gets really bad and you end up with what's called war crimes. But if you win, you don't get prosecuted. So that's just how that works. Now you take that same system, you apply it to your own civilization. What happens? Your own civilians, you get starvation, you get political terror, mass executions, genocide, right? You get dictatorship. That is the path to dictatorship. And every single one of those.
All right. Looks like we froze again. Internet's back at it. Hopefully we get Mate back to finish that up. Let's see what happened. We'll give him a text here. Might just take a minute to get him back in the chat. Also, keep in mind we are going to answer some questions from the comments at the end about the draft system. I know a lot of y'all were pretty into that backpack cocktail situation. Thought that was pretty amazing myself. Just miss those days in general when we could all be at an event like that. I'd love to see Mate with his backpack draft system. But just give us a sec. We should be able to get him back in to wrap up, get to those questions. But if you do have more questions for him, add them to the comments and we'll make sure to ask. All right, let's see. All right, sounds like Mate's working on it. His internet's in and out. Like he said, he's at work, he's at a restaurant, so you know they're probably operating a bunch of things off the internet right now. Can only handle so much. So many people live streaming everywhere. Let's see if we can get him back in here. Here we go.
All right, getting back on my soapbox here. Okay, so as we left off, sorry about that. Basically what we have is these horrible things, war crimes that happen in our own civilization. Now, not to be a big bummer, but that's just how that system works. You look at every dictator that's been launched, that is the platform they come through. They get to that because of a military indoctrination. That system basically makes a path and an opportunity for people that work in that lack of humanity setting. And they go to the very top because they use that same system and work within theirs and get better and better and higher and higher. And when they get into power, they cause mass problems, right? So it basically creates a pyramid. So in a pyramid, it was a terrible pyramid by my hand. You could just imagine one. In a pyramid, everybody's at the bottom, they're at the top. It concentrates wealth, exposure, credit, everything. And they use that platform to do whatever insane thing they want. Now, at the end of the day, applying that same system through the Brigade Kitchen creates a system where you're doing the same thing. You're applying a military system to a civilian profit, a for-profit kitchen. Okay, it's not a necessity. It's a profit-driving machine. So in that, what you end up with in this civilian business is the very public at the bottom of the pyramid, very much insulated from what's happening at the top, even at the center. In the center are you and me. We are the ones whose value and whose work is being funneled to the top in the terms of wealth, credit, and everything else. Now, they make more and more money. They get all the exposure. And then what they do is they make another pyramid, right? And that's what we call these restaurant empires. Now, you're unemployed. I'm unemployed, right? It creates we're in a very weird situation, right? Thing is, so are the pyramids right now. All these big restaurant pyramids that follow this function that basically exploit that middle rung of the pyramid and insulate it from moving upwards are also down. It's super important. So right now, while the pyramids are down, you right now listening to this are from the middle of that pyramid. I'll tell you why in 3 steps. So if you have health insurance, if you have a 5-day-a-week work week with paid time off, and if you have a path to move forward, you are not in a pyramid. Congratulations. But if you don't have all 3 of those things, you are in a pyramid, unfortunately. The same way I was, same way I was until I didn't have a job. So basically in this pandemic, it sucks. Everything's down, everything's broken, but the systems that were in place to keep you insulated from the top are also down. So in the end of this systems of pressure talk, I need to talk to you very directly. I need to ask you to make a sacrifice. Use your outside talents and skills, because these pyramids are down right now and they have to go away. So those systems either have to allow for those three things to exist in your life, or they have to starve to death and be replaced by systems that do. And at the end of the day, health insurance, 5-day work weeks with paid time off, and a path forward into ownership or equity. That's it. These systems are going to have death throes that are very violent, and they're going to give you very, very lucrative deals on 2 of those 3 things, but they're not going to give you all 3 because they can't have you getting to the top, because it breaks the entire system. That's kind of the part. That's kind of the problem. It's going to be lucrative. They're going to try to throw money at you. They're going to try to throw time off at you, maybe an equity, but not all 3. And if they don't give you all 3, don't go back, because you're in a pyramid. If they do give you all 3, then go back, kill it, like make all the money, get your equity, get your time off. But if they don't give you all 3, by going back, you're literally undoing what the rest of us have paid everything for in a matter of jobs, lives, and everything. But it's literally an opportunity for every single one of you to take true ownership of this industry and remove that pyramid structure from everything. If you go back before those 3 conditions are met, you will literally be building through your own work the mechanism of your own exploitation. The mechanism of your own exploitation by your own hand. If you go back right now and don't figure out how to pay rent and this and that, there's so many creative solutions out there. There's so many ways to make money. Go to the post office, go to here, go to there, get a bullshit day job and just outlast them, because the amount of money it takes for you to pay rent and live is much smaller than the amount of money it takes for them to keep that pyramid going. And they will starve before you if you don't go back. So at the end of the day, thank you to Black Lives Matter. Thank you to everybody in Portland and all over the country fighting every day in the streets. You guys are absolutely making a difference. You're making a pressure difference. 100% of my chats proceeds here are going to Black Lives Matter. I think it's the most important thing happening in the country right now, but we need to realize in our own industry, the ability that we have to request the 3 things that we can change our own station with. And if you don't have health insurance, you don't have a regulated work week with time off, and you don't have equity movement forward, you don't have it, you live in a pyramid. So that is the second system of pressure. Hopefully we can address both. One will make you a little bit more money in a draft cocktail. The second one could change the life of the entire industry forever. Thank you to Campari and Benny very much. Thank you for this. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I hope this really struck something for you, either in the terms of draft systems and the fact that there's no such thing as a tap, or changing the world. Hopefully one or the 2. But please consider all of it. Thank you for sticking around so much. And I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor back to Benny.
Awesome.
We got real political, Ben.
Dude, I love the real talk, dude. Yeah, I mean, I back that. It's awesome. So yeah, there were a couple questions, not many. If you can hear me over there,
I can hear you.
First off, somebody was just super psyched on the backpack cocktail. They want to know they want to know more about it. They want their own. And we can get to that. But 2 other questions first. So someone was wondering what sounds like a great idea for a system until they actually try it, like a rookie mistake. Like, oh man, so-and-so told me this is possible, or I read this online, but it's like the first mistake, you shouldn't listen to them type of thing in draft systems. Oh no. Looks like you might have froze again. Hopefully we'll get him back in a second to answer those questions. I'm glad we got through his presentation with only a couple technical difficulties. He definitely got through all his points. I really like that real talk session at the end.
Okay, so the rookie mistake, I can answer that question really easily.
Yep.
The rookie mistake is trying to do more than you're able to, trying to build too much functionality into a system before you really understand the components. If you stack something with 3 different kinds of gases and blenders and you try to push for this insane system that your head is trying to reach for, and you don't really understand, you haven't functionally worked on a basic system, then you're going to have problems that you can't really diagnose yourself. So that is the biggest rookie mistake, is trying too hard. It's trying to do too much at once.
Yeah.
If you limit your scope at first and build, you can always, once you have a functioning base system, you can always build functionality into it.
Cool.
Like I added a carbonation line into that last one. That's awesome, but it doesn't need it, you know? And it's also something that I had to train the team on, like, hey, don't worry about this line. People building the cocktails will worry about it. So every piece you add on becomes a piece of complication when something goes wrong in your system. So that's the only big.
So it sounds like less is more there. Looks like he's frozen again one more time, but to answer that question, rookie mistakes, don't shoot for the moon right away necessarily. Build a functioning system that is going to be easy to maintain, especially if you're doing it on your own. And then you can add some more of the bells and whistles as you go. All right. Well, we'll give him one more chance to come back in. There is one more question that I wanted to ask from the comments. But thanks everybody for hanging in there, tuning in again. If you do want to see more distance learning classes like this one, definitely follow Portland Cocktail Week on Facebook. You can also go to their Instagram. That's where you're going to see what's coming up next. And we have new classes on weekdays, as well as an archive to the past classes on the Facebook page. So if you have anybody, any friends that you think would be interested, that you know that aren't on Facebook, we actually upload all these to the Portland Cocktail YouTube as well. So pdxcw.com/YouTube. So that's also a great, easy way to share those links with people. Don't know if we'll be getting Mate back before we wrap up, but you can actually find him. We'll put his Instagram up real quick. Shoot him a DM like he mentioned. I mean, he really made this draft conversation like straightforward, to the points, kept it moving. So if it was a little quick for you, watch it again. It was awesome. I like how concise it was. Here we go. So Mate, one last question. I was kind of just doing the wrap up and the shout outs just in case, but somebody was asking for some great or terrible ideas for cocktails to pressurize. So I think they might mean to carbonate or just pressurize, push through the lines in general. Good cocktail things. I know you said things with less particles and pieces is definitely better, more clarified, I guess.
Yeah, so the best idea is something that is spirit forward, clarity, no ingredients that have a shelf life limitation. Those are your best. Your worst are things that have different densities. The cutest, most adorable solution to citrus in a cocktail, or a heavy dense part of cocktail that will settle out, is vibrators, which is the funniest thing you'll ever hear, but literally a sex toy it's waterproof, battery operated. I know a bar that buys 10 at a time. They just toss a battery into it and throw it in the keg. The vibration keeps everything in solution, and you keep going. It's not exactly the most sustainable way to do it, and there are people that are inventing kegs that will recirculate. I have some friends that put down just aquarium pump motors, and they built them into their own tanks to like keep everything recirculating. That's your biggest question. That's your biggest problem. At the end of the day, you could just start the day off and give it a good hard shake. You can use the vibrator trick. It's an excellent way to do it. But really the only thing to stay away from is things that stratify really hard after a very short amount of time. That's your worst bet.
Yeah, so if you're using fresh ginger juice, you definitely want to make sure that stuff is like clarified if possible, because you get all that sediment.
Yeah, clarified as much as you can, and you'll just see a better result. You know, at the end of the day, the best solution for a draft system is to not try to overcomplicate it. So if you have a bunch of different ingredients and you have one problematic one, say citrus, and you don't want to clarify, you don't have the ability to use mimic citruses, which are actually cheaper than regular citruses, and you lose a ton of labor and fresh costs. I'm not like pushing something here, but I'm obviously pushing something here. But if you don't have that ability, then keep your citrus separate, add it to the bottom of the glass, pull in the cocktail. The mixing will do most of the mixing for you, And you can either put it into a tin and rock it, or you can just send it out as a highball and add a carbonated thing to it, or have your base carbonated. If you have a carbonated base, whether that's soda water or an entire carbonated cocktail, when it hits the citrus, what happens is that citrus gives it nucleation points, right? Like we talked about the bubbles on the dirty glass. So that carbonation releasing, that little bit of carbonation that releases, creates a lot of turbulence, and it actually immediately mixes your solution. So if you take something that's highly carbonated, hit the amount of citrus in the glass that you need, the 3/4 ounces, that carbonation release will actually mix it for you. Your solution's coming out cold, right? So now you've chilled, you've incorporated, and you've aerated, because it's carbonated, an entire mixture. What are you doing in a tin? You're chilling, mixing, and aerating. So you literally did the entire thing. We had a system back in Dallas, Texas called Remedy, where we had a multiplex soda built in. It's basically a soda gun, an old school jerk soda gun, where you it has a glycol chilling system, like a long draw draft system, but the only thing it chills is water. And it has a CO2 tank that's constantly pressurizing it, and it has a glycol system on it constantly chilling it. So what you get is like Topo Chico on steroids. It's extremely carbonated. So what we did is we put the cocktails together in citrus, everything else, and we basically added those two ingredients to the bottom of a highball, and we hit it with this extremely cold, extremely carbonated, aggressive water. The water mixed it. We knew the fill line, and then we just added ice. We did 5, 6 ingredient highballs going out perfectly in under 30 seconds by using the effects of carbonation and the effects of the draft system without even really having to worry about citrus lifespan and things. So understanding some of the basics of how gas interacts is really a great way for you to maximize the system to you. But don't feel like you have to carbonate and keg everything. Buying a Spinzall or whatever might be a good investment for you, but it might not. You could just skip that step and add just, keep it simple and add the citrus, then add your cocktail, maybe give it a toss, maybe not, test it out. Give it the simplest format you can, test the results, and then base it off of what you want. Sorry, I'm constantly moving around trying to get closer to this Wi-Fi router here. But yeah, test the results at the least cost-worthy, simplest function. And if you get a good result, don't keep pushing. Just like make it work. And that should simplify most things.
Awesome. Well, that pretty much covers it. Like I said before, when we lost you a moment ago, man, you really did a great job keeping this concise to the points, very comprehensive. So I just want to say one more time, if y'all enjoyed this class, there's an archive of amazing classes and seminars on Portland's Facebook. So facebook.com PDXCW, Portland Cocktail Week. Look out for more of these. Follow them on Instagram at Portland or at PDXCW to see what's coming up. And of course, follow Mate, DM him all your questions if you didn't get a chance to, and follow us at the Campari community. So we'll be posting, of course, all the times we collaborate with Portland Cocktail Week, and we've also got our own great content on Instagram. So thank you, Mate, for joining us. Any last words?
No, just keep fighting. Get those pyramids down.
I feel you. All right, y'all.
Keep going.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.